Hello again, Joan back with you with part 2 of Easy Parenting Tips. And today I'm going to give you some tips for cooling down, talk about how parents put labels on their children to describe their traits, natural and logical consequences, and mutual respect. In my last video, I gave you some easy parenting tips, and I talked about how children wind parents up, what parents do, and I felt that I couldn't go on and do another subject without giving you some tips on how to manage the behaviour. And I talk about natural and logical consequences instead of using rewards and punishment. So when children wind you up, what can you do? There's a chance that you might do or say something that might harm them or make them feel bad. So my suggestion is breathe slowly and deeply and count to 10. Remind yourself that you're the adult and show a good example on how to behave for your children. When parents use labels to describe children, sometimes they say, you're cheeky, you're bossy, you're stubborn, you're lazy, you're loud. Children live up to the label, and children learn that they're getting lots of attention by being the label. This attention that they get is usually negative by the parents. So when you think your child is stubborn and you might say to them, you're stubborn, think instead of the positive and think of the determination in that stubborn trait and say, I like your determination for sticking with it. Well done. Instead of thinking your child is bossy and saying to them, you're bossy, see the leadership qualities in them by giving them jobs that will show their leadership and responsibility. Is your child too talkative? See the positive and see them as being friendly. So to discipline children for misbehaviour, I recommend using limited choices and using encouragement. And I talked in my last video about giving choices to children and that it's very respectful. And to give encouragement to children, remember to be sincere in your comments. Notice small details and mention them in particular. Be personal. And don't destroy the encouragement by adding a negative at the end. A child needs encouragement like a plant needs sun and water. So as I mentioned there, use choices and encouragement before you go on to feel you have to discipline children. But where you do need to discipline them further, avoid rewards and punishment. They interfere with the development of the child. And I believe rewards and punishment are outdated methods of managing children's behaviour in 2020. I like to talk about using natural and logical consequences. They help the child to feel respected and worthwhile. What is discipline? The object of discipline is for the parents to guide the child towards self-discipline and self-control, and to help the child to see what should be done or what should not be done, and to guide the child towards taking responsibility for whichever he chooses and whichever decision he takes. So with parents, I like to talk about natural and logical consequences. Natural and logical consequences teach the child to behave acceptably for his own sake. Natural consequences happen when a child does something, makes his choice, and experiences the consequence of the choice he makes. So to set a logical consequence, that's something that's set in advance. It's a condition that's set in advance. And it's agreed in advance with the children or child about the house rules and if they're not obeyed. And for example, they could be set out for when a child wants to go out and meet friends, go to the cinema, possibly go to a disco. Well then, this is where communication comes in, and you sit down, you have a discussion with them, and you agree the times that they're expected home, and then what the consequence will be if the rule should be broken. But parents should also take care that the consequence that's set is not seen as a punishment by the child. So the approach to logical consequences is based on the assumption that children learn best by experiencing the consequences or the results of their choices. Now, to set a logical consequence, it must pass the test of the 3 R's. Firstly, it must be related to the misbehaviour. Secondly, it must be respectful. In order to avoid any humiliation, it must be firm, you're respecting yourself, and kind, you're respecting the child. And third, it must be reasonable. So it's as reasonably understood to the child as it is to the parent. And again, it's not seen as punishment, because if it's overly harsh, the child will understand it to be a punishment. To give you an example of a logical consequence being set, your teenager wants to go into town to go to the cinema. So this is where communication comes in, because you need to sit down, have a chat with them, find out about what time he'll be leaving for the cinema and what time the cinema will be over and the time he's expected home. And so in the discussion, then you talk about, again, the coming home time and what time he's expected home at. And then if the rule then is broken, what happens then? For the example, the next time he wants to go out, if he said he'd be home at 11 and he didn't come home until 12, we'll then discuss then what should happen. But the main thing is, in setting the consequence, that it's not a punishment. And just to note on natural consequences, you actually don't have to set them at all. They happen, just as the word says, they happen naturally. Sometimes we hear parents say, I don't feel respected by my children. Well, parents should have respect for the child as a human being and as a contributing member of the family. The child will feel respected and respond. When parents respect the child first, in turn the child then will respect us. And over time a positive relationship will develop. And the child will respond by cooperating. With teenagers, try to discuss any conflicts in a positive way without getting cross, and try to negotiate and find a middle way, just as you would with an adult. What I covered in this talk today was, I gave you a few cooling down tips. I talked about how the labels parents use to describe their children's traits. I talked about natural and logical consequences and mutual respect. Take care of yourself, keep breathing, mind that self-care. Bye bye for now.